Let's just jump right in, shall we? If you were to actually sit down and listen to the recent, sprawling 3-hour conversation between Joe Rogan and Chris Williamson, your head would probably be spinning with the sheer volume of ideas. It's a fascinating, unscripted journey for sure. But today, in this explainer, we're going to do the heavy lifting for you. We are synthesizing the absolute most critical insights from that massive conversation into a really focused analysis of how our digital environments are fundamentally shaping our societal and psychological realities. Think of this as your guided tour through the modern illusions we navigate every single day. 7 to 10 hours. Just let that sink in for a second. That's the average daily screen time for teenagers today. Honestly, it's a statistic that stopped the hosts right in their tracks, and I don't blame them. I mean, when you spend more time looking at a screen than you do sleeping, a profound psychological shift starts to happen. As Williamson pointed out, for a massive segment of the population, the digital world is actually becoming more real than the physical world. Our digital habits, well, they aren't just a pastime anymore, right? They're literally the primary lens through which we experience reality. To make sense of exactly how this impacts us, we'll follow a quick roadmap today. We're going to look at the digital trap, toxic compassion, the free speech chasm, reality versus ideology, and finally, the illusion of success. So let's get into it. Section 1, the digital trap. We've all asked ourselves why we stay trapped in bad digital habits, right? The conversation really highlighted how massive screen time fundamentally warps human behavior, creating these intense parasocial relationships where millions of young people spend vastly more time listening to influencers than talking to their own parents. But why do we get stuck in these patterns? Well, the answer is something called path dependency. The host used this absolutely fascinating anecdote about the QWYT keyboard, the one we all use on our phones and laptops. Did you know the QWYT layout was originally designed back in the 1800s to actually slow typists down? Yeah, it was just so the mechanical arms of early typewriters wouldn't jam. We have much more efficient layouts available today, yet we are all permanently stuck using a system designed for inefficiency simply because it's what we got used to in the past. And it turns out much of our digital behavior today operates on this exact same path dependency. Moving right along to Section 2, toxic compassion. When you basically live online, the appearance of doing something good often becomes way more valuable than the actual result. And this is what the speakers call toxic compassion. It's when you prioritize short-term emotional comfort or virtue signaling over long-term reality and practical problem solving. The podcast cited a pretty glaring example of this: a climate protester who poured green dye into the ancient, beautiful Venice canals. Now, obviously, the goal was to draw attention to climate change. But practically speaking, it got a massive amount of online attention and social media likes for the protester, sure, but it ultimately alienated the general public. People just saw an important historical site being vandalized. It inconvenienced them instead of actually compelling them to care. And this brings us to a really stark contrast that the hosts highlighted, bringing in Elon Musk's philosophy on the matter. Musk argues that we have to focus on the tangible reality of advancing technology, like building electric vehicles, to actually solve environmental issues. This is what we'd call doing good. But on the flip side, much of modern activism on social media falls under appearing good. These are performative actions that provide short-term emotional validation for the activist, but, offer absolutely zero progress on the actual scientific or societal problems at hand. To see exactly how this performative focus warps our reality, we just need to look at the staggering disparities in researcher Toby Ord's probability statistics regarding existential risks over the next century. While societal panic and massive resource allocation are heavily focused on climate change, which Ord calculates as a 1 in 10,000 risk of destroying humanity, we pay far less attention to unaligned artificial intelligence, which carries a staggering 1 in 10 risk, or engineered pandemics, which are at 1 in 30. The argument the hosts made here is that our digital outrage culture is misaligning our focus away from the actual statistical dangers. Which brings us to Section 3, the free speech chasm. This kind of societal misdirection creates a massive chilling effect on free speech, and it's rooted in what's known as the Cassandra complex. Named after the Greek myth of the woman who was cursed to see the future but never be believed, the host pointed out that being right but being early often feels exactly like being wrong. Take Ignaz Semmelweis in the 1840s, for instance. He discovered germ theory and literally begged doctors to wash their hands. His reward? He was mocked by academia and tragically died in an asylum. Or look at Rachel Carson, who was completely castigated by scientists for warning the world about the pesticide DDT, only to be proven entirely right years later. We can really see the chilling effect of punishing early truth-tellers by comparing two historical giants, Copernicus and Galileo. Copernicus figured out the Earth revolved around the sun, but he was so terrified of the cultural authorities of his time that he waited until he was literally on his deathbed to reveal his work. Fast forward 100 years, and Galileo shouted very similar findings from the rooftops. And for that, he was punished with lifetime house arrest. The speakers argued that when modern society heavily polices speech and cancels outliers, we essentially force our greatest thinkers to act like Copernicus, hiding their truths just out of fear. Now let's look at Section 4, Reality versus Ideology. The hosts then applied this tension between perceived truth and societal rules to a very modern cultural flashpoint, biological reality in physical sports. They explored several recent controversies to highlight the clash between empathetic inclusivity and competitive fairness. For example, they discussed the specific real-world case of a 6'4", 400-pound biological male entering and winning a women's strongwoman competition before later being stripped of the title. They also objectively broke down the complexities surrounding chromosomal testing in Olympic boxing. Now, the central debate the hosts identified here is whether prioritizing ideological inclusivity, which essentially affirms someone's identity, is overriding the biological realities required for safety and fairness in physical combat and strength sports. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the illusion of success. Stepping away from all those heavy societal debates, we turn inward to human psychology. Consider this theory by comedian Jimmy Carr that the hosts discussed. It looks at how our digital and cultural environments trick us into chasing a really hollow version of achievement. Basically, human nature is fundamentally wired to value trajectory over position. Psychologically speaking, a person who is climbing from 300th place up to 250th place is actually experiencing way more dopamine and happiness than a person who is dropping from first place down to second place. We are completely addicted to the climb, to the scoring of points, to gaining more followers, or acquiring more power. And that makes simply arriving at success feel surprisingly empty. The emptiness of pure success is captured so perfectly by a profound anecdote they shared about champion golfer Scottie Scheffler. He worked his absolute entire life, sacrificing pretty much everything, to reach the absolute pinnacle of his sport. And when he finally got there, his realization was stunningly raw. He admitted that winning a major tournament is awesome for exactly 2 minutes. And then, life just goes on, and the pressure immediately shifts to the next tournament. He literally asked, "What is the point?" It is a stark, fascinating reminder of the fleeting nature of pure victory. So the big question I really want you to take away from this explainer is this. From staring at our phones for 10 hours a day, to performing toxic compassion for internet likes, to chasing a success that only feels good for about 2 minutes, are we sacrificing our genuine daily happiness for the mere illusion of future success? It's a powerful thought from a truly expansive conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on this structured journey through the noise. Take a moment to look away from the screen today, maybe go outside, and I will see you in the next explainer.